Welcome, everyone. Just want to let folks get settled in virtually here. I'm going to disable the wait room. So folks joining us a little bit later will be able to join us when they can. Let's see, yes, disable the wait room. Okay. Wonderful. Let's let a few folks get settled in virtually here before we do a few introductory slides, and then we'll get started here with today's special presentation. We have a special event today. Good to see some familiar names and faces in the audience. I want to welcome everyone and say good morning or good afternoon, depending on where this broadcast finds you. I really appreciate you all taking the time out of your days to be here with us. And as I said, this is a special presentation, a special behavioral health webinar presentation. And then this is session 1 of a planned 5 sessions. And my name is Steve Steiny. I'm one of the managers here at the National American Indian Alaska Native Addiction Technology Transfer Center here at the University of Iowa. And I've got one of our speakers here today, and I think we'll have the other 2 joining us at some point today or certainly throughout the series. But Suzan McVicker is here, and she will be leading discussion today on the topic. Today's session is entitled Internal Family Systems, an Overview, Applications, and Discussion. We're going to keep that main title throughout the series, but we'll add focus titles as we go through. So hope you all are able to sort of close anything else you've got going on and really enjoy this session today. We're going to cover a lot of information, and I'm really honored to have Dr. McVicker here with us today. So I'll go through these intro slides, and then I'm going to turn it over to Kiave to get us started off in the right way. Well, as most of you know who have attended some of our sessions throughout the last 3 years in particular, this event is brought to you by the National American Indian Alaska Native Addiction Technology Transfer Center. As I mentioned earlier, we're located at the University of Iowa. I'm broadcasting to you right now live from the College of Public Health here on campus. We are part of a larger national network made up of 10 regional centers, a national Hispanic and Latinx center, as well as an ATTC network coordinating office located at the University of Missouri. This project is funded by SAMHSA. The content, however, is developed by the presenters, and the opinions expressed today do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of SAMHSA, HHS, or the American Indian Alaska Native ATTC. As many of you know, we will reach out to you following today's event. We will include, and I'll talk with Dr. McVicker, I think we plan to include PDF copies of the information so that you can share that with your colleagues who may not have been able to be here today. We're also recording this event, and we'll make that recording available as well through our YouTube archive. And that can be viewed at your convenience, or you can share that link with another. We're also going to be offering 2 NADAC approved CEUs, continuing education units, for today's presentation, and you can request those at the time that you receive the follow-up email. And lastly, we will be asking for your participation in a short survey. You don't have to participate in the survey. We'll have an opportunity today to complete that at the end of the event, or you'll have another opportunity to consider completing that survey at the end or when you receive the follow-up email. So we would really appreciate your feedback. We've added a couple of short answer questions to this questionnaire, really so that we can hear in your own words some suggestions or feedback about things you liked or areas we can improve. So if you have any questions about this survey, please reach out to myself. I also have on the line here with me or on the call today, my graduate assistant, Andrew Lilly. He can also take emails and we can together respond to those if you have any questions about the survey. It's completely confidential and it can't be linked to you in any way. So just keep that in mind, and we really would appreciate hearing from you. I know we're gathered here virtually today, but we wanted to take the time to acknowledge the land and pay respect to the indigenous nations whose homelands were forcibly taken and inhabited. Please take a moment to read this land acknowledgement, which was created by 3 former members of our team, Ella and Keely Driscoll, and Mr. Sean Bear from the Meskwaki and Winnebago nations, respectively. Thank you. Our speakers throughout this series, and we're going to, I don't know, Susan, if Dan is in the audience. Dan, are you with us? Were you able to join us? I haven't been able to check to see if he's joined later.
Yeah, Bim is here.
Dan, if you're there, feel free to jump in. For this first speaker I want to introduce to you is Dr. Dan Foster. Dan is a long-time advisory council member with our center. He's also a senior consultant and is a vital part of our center. And we are looking forward to having him join us today or throughout the series. But he is living up in Montana, and we're really looking forward to having him join us here at some point. So Dan, if your ears are burning, it's because we're talking about you. So hope to see Doc Foster join us here soon. He is a colleague, and I also consider him a good friend. I also want to introduce, I know this lady from somewhere. I can't quite remember where I've seen her, but I want to introduce my new colleague and also consider her a friend, Suzan McVicker. And Suzan and I were introduced to each other through Dr. Foster. So Suzan is a certified IFS therapist and really has a passion for this particular approach, and really looking forward to learning from her. And I've already learned so much just in our planning calls. So Suzan, I'll let you speak a little bit about yourself when we are ready, but really happy to have you on the call today, and so honored to have you part of this project. Thank you. And we're also hoping to hear from BIM Warren Pourier, also known as BIM. We're hoping to have him join us at some point during this series. He also has experience in applications and teaching of the IFS approach, and we know that BIM also wears many hats, and I think he is right on the cusp of calving season. So he may be out in the field. So hopefully he'll be able to join us here at some point during the today's session or at some point during the series. So Bam, if you're there, feel free to unmute and jump in there if you want to add a little bit more to that. But just as a reminder before I close this slide deck, just wanted to remind everybody that you're currently muted. You can use the chat box. We really would love to have you use the chat box or the hand raise feature if you want to jump in and make a comment, or as we're going along, if you want to just unmute and jump right in there. I'm sure Suzan would be happy to take questions and comments as we're going along. So I just wanted to remind everyone to remain muted so that we don't have any confusion or talking over one another. I don't know if you all were able to catch some of the flute music playing as you came on, and that is right from the source here, Kiave Bone. Recorded that in his car last night, ladies and gentlemen. So I said to him this morning, the acoustics in your car are very good. So we're hoping to play a bit more of that for you today. I've been listening to it all morning. So bless you, brother. I appreciate you, and I'm so glad you were able to join us this morning. I want to turn the floor over to Suzan and Bim so they can talk a little bit more about themselves and get you guys oriented for today's session. While Susan's doing that, Suzan, if it's okay, I'm going to try and get your slides pulled up so we can get those ready to go.
That's good. Wado, Steve, Ale, Kiavi, Sio Nagata, Wado for being here. Suzan, Gunti Yoneg Dawado, Tawori Sagonagi, Gunti Salagi Dawado. I really appreciate hearing the language that Kiave used, and I'm learning it myself. So I'm going to just start right out with something that we do in IFS, and that is speak for our parts. When we speak for our parts, it helps us to calm because we're moving out what is inside of us, and if it's anything but calm, which I'm going to speak for a part that was not calm, is not calm, so that can help us and the whole group of us to return to calm. And okay, so I have a part that it took a lot of courage for that part to use the Salagi language because I am a novice, a real novice. And Cherokee is a class 4 language. That's the toughest language for English speakers to learn. But in the pandemic, I had time and I had wanted to learn the language for years. So this is about as far as I've gotten in 3 years. So I have another part, I'll speak for that part too, that just feels delighted to be able to use the language and to be able to use it with a Cherokee speaker here. So thank you, Wado, thank you. This is like a full circle beginning here for me today because well, I have friends who are here today who know that I have been doing this work in IFS and then IFS in Indian country for years, but have never been to any of the teaching or trainings or anything that I've done. And so I want to offer a special welcome to those people who said that they were interested and came today. As well as just, I'm so glad to see some of you who are newer friends through the Internal Family Systems Indigenous Council, through the IFS 8C meeting. Welcome, just so happy that you're here. And then I see people from my home state and I'm so delighted to see everyone in this circle. So it was about 15 years ago that I started going down to the Qualla boundary, to the land of the Cherokee, the eastern band of the Cherokee in North Carolina, in the mountains that I love down there, the Smoky Mountains. And it was a powerful spiritual and emotional experience for me when I rolled into town. And it's even I'll speak for another part. Another part has tears close to the surface as I remember that and recall it with you all, because when I first looked up and saw street signs with the Cherokee syllabary, and I saw the Cherokee syllabary on the sides of buildings to let us know where we were, as a Cherokee descendant who did not grow up even knowing that, um, this touched my heart in a way that the language is meant to do, and that is to reach from our ancestors to today into our hearts. This language is meant to reach heart to heart, and that is something that is also similar with IFS. This is this is a way of the heart. So as it took me 2 or 3 times coming down to the boundary twice a year and sitting in circle and listening to the cultural stories of the old ones and learning the cosmology of Indian people, which I really didn't know much about any tribal history or anything. Um, and learning by doing, our teacher was really big into embodied learning, and so we danced, we sang, we did plays together where we took roles and enacted the old stories together. um, and what what an experience. And I began to realize that it was a healing experience. And as healing ways of the old ones were described, and as we participated in some of those healing ways, I realized that IFS is very similar. Um, there are so many overlaps. Of course, there are differences, but there are overlaps. So that was that was the beginning of what I call my walk into Indian country, because that was when I decided that I have something to share here. I have something that is very similar to the traditional culture, and yet it's new. And I'll say more about that as we move along, how IFS is related to Indigenous cultures. So I'd also like to say that a sister that I met in that circle is here today, and welcome to her as well. Um, we have been together sharing IFS and in Indian country for all those years now. So our focus today is just on some of the basics of IFS, and that's systems and parts and self, the internal parts. And we'll cover topics of burdens, blending, speaking for parts, unblending, unburdening, transgenerational burdens, ancestral burdens, and more in the coming webinars. Or if we have questions about those things today, we can touch on them. But that's today we're just going to focus on becoming parts detectors. So, okay, Steve, next slide, please. This is a quote from Dick Schwartz, who is the developer, the founder of the Internal Family Systems model. And he says that IFS is more than a therapeutic technique. It's a conceptual framework. It's a practice for developing love for ourselves and others. And that's one of the we can clinically relate to them as people or inner relatives. Hurts may be experienced in a number of ways: thoughts, feelings, sensations, images, words, sounds, felt sense, inner voices, physical symptoms. The parts come into the world with us, either manifested or dormant, and they are activated at different developmental stages and as the result of trauma. All parts want something positive for for us as an individual, and will use a variety of strategies to gain influence within our internal system. And this is that, all parts have a positive intention. And each part has a self. And those parts and those parts of parts, the self follows all the way through the system. And parts are organized to protect the self, and they may be forced by the external environment to take on extreme roles, do extreme things, think extreme things, um, either by becoming more dominant and trying to control the whole system and control the self, or by going into hiding, or what we call exile, the exile parts. And parts develop a complex system of interactions among themselves. Sometimes we're not aware of it. Sometimes we can hear them arguing or agreeing or in conflict. And we call these polarizations. And those polarizations develop as parts try to gain influence within the system. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the self. And the word self can be problematic on this crosswalk into indigenous or kinship worldviews. And the IFS definition really takes care of that, but in Western or Euro-American ways and traditions of psychology, or just ways of speaking, the self has gotten a bad reputation as being selfish or egotistical, but the IFS doesn't really see it that way. The self in the IFS glossary, which is on the IFSI website, the core of a person which contains leadership qualities such as compassion, perspective, curiosity, and confidence. And self is best equipped to lead the internal family. And then there was a beautiful definition of it that came out in written by an indigenous person, a Salagi person, Arthur Bloom, in Morrison Lome's 2020 publication. The inner self is the unseen and often unknowable part of each human being, and is what we seek to understand and balance to be physically, mentally, and spiritually healthy. So I think we're getting close to break time, and I'd like to talk just a little bit about the self before we do that, if that works for people. So, Steve, next slide, please. Thank you. The self is a different level of entity than the parts in IFS, and the self knows that we are all connected. The self is present at birth, but is also in process. It needs the parts for its development, and the parts are resources. When they're unburdened, they're resources for the self. They never go away. We can't kill them, get rid of them, or anything. They are part of us, and when they're unburdened, give us great gifts. The self can and should lead the inner system. It has no power except granted by the parts. And self is both, we used to talk about this more, it's a long conversation. It's both particle and wave. Particle in that it's manifest, it's active, it's boundaried, and it's also a wave in that it's the transcendent unitive state. And sometimes we talk about this as the ocean and the wave, and that the wave is always part of the ocean. Sometimes it comes out and separates, and then it goes back into the ocean. So the self must be embodied in order to lead. And that's really the work of this model. We can't embody ourselves as long as we have so many burdens that are covering up the self with extreme beliefs, behaviors, thoughts, that won't allow. Again, the parts give the self permission to lead. And as long as we're so extreme, we don't allow ourselves to be there and lead us creativity. So is there any comment, question before we take a short break? So I'm inviting you to get paper and pencil or pen or colored markers if we're going to do a paper and pencil exercise in parts detecting when we come back from our break. So just 8.5 by 11 or a note paper, any size that you have will work, and something to write with. And we'll take a short break, a 4 or 5 minute break, to just get up and stretch and uh, get supplies.
Susan, oh, there was a question of, so how does trauma happen in an indigenous world?
Oh boy. Would you like to take that one, Bim?
I'll try my best, but
Okay, thank you.
for me, I think it started with the a long time ago. There was trauma, and different things happened, but also in place were ceremonies to deal with grief, to deal with loss, to deal with uh, different the the trauma that was experienced, and there was that belief um, in the creator. And I think what happened here with being placed on reservations, Black Elk, one of the spiritual leaders at the beginning of the reservation, said he called it the sacred hoop. The sacred hoop was broken. And I always, this is the book of Bim again, but I thought for a long time on what he meant by that. And I think that the sacred hoop was that collective community consciousness. There was one language, there's one religion, and um, the values were all the same for, and there were different branches of the Lakota, but they had all come together, and they all had that same consciousness. And so that was broken by um, being placed on a reservation, the children being taken away and putting in uh, boarding schools, um, people not being allowed to speak the language or practice the ceremonies. Um, and then I believe alcohol and now drugs were introduced, and that further like creates trauma. So a lot of our children today, and I forgot to mention, I work at Little Wound School in the middle of the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, but I think I really feel that trauma to me is the root of there's the current trauma based on coming from the legacy of trauma, if that makes any sense, because it's probably been 4 or 5 generations back now that they were placed on a reservation and the boarding school, all of that had a bearing on trauma. And then uh, alcohol was introduced, which further separated the family system, and now it's become a legacy. And that our parts, the way I look at parts sometimes is they're in other forms of other models, they're called defenses in a way. And I don't know if that's accurate or not. That's the best way I could describe it. So these managers take on these protective roles, and sometimes they take on the extreme roles. And I believe that's a result that results in a lot of our medical diagnosis of uh, mental illness within our people, and also it relates to the firefighter of the alcohol and drugs coming in to numb the trauma and the pain caused by the current trauma they're experiencing, which was started years ago through that legacy trauma. That makes any sense at all to anyone. So in our, but one of the major things that was taken away was our culture and our spiritual practices. And that's slowly coming back. And along with legacy trauma, I believe there's legacy gifts, because when we work with our children and bring the drum in, our songs and things like that, they come to that. They come to it. So I think epigenetically there's legacy gifts and legacy traumas. And I think using this model is a way to like heal that along with our ceremonies. And one of the things that always fascinates me is that in a lot of the stuff that are in the models, mental health models, was already here, and they took them away. Remember that? Like for me, even when I look at IFS, it's nothing probably really new. It's something similar to our ancestors knew a lot about prior to being placed on the reservation. And I have to say, I always say, parlez-vous français en pet ou acheté? I mean, that's just kind of a joke to mixed blood. So I'm not like, so I come from two worlds. So, but my heart goes with the Lakota teachings and my journey. I'm still learning. I probably learned this much, but I'm open to learn more. But just wanted to, I don't know if that answers the question or not, but it changed our belief system. Yeah.
Yes, this is such a big topic, and I'm glad to hear you speak. Others are saying that yes, you did very well speaking, and that you are summing it up well, and I appreciate the feedback here in the chat, because it is really hard to sum up in a short time.
Just wanted to shout out to my sister Julia too. Good to see you.
All right, let's take that short break, and we'll see you back in 4 or 5 minutes.
I'm going to play a little of Kiawe's flute music now. Enjoy.
Oh, wonderful. Wado, Piave. So as people are finding their way back with paper and pencil, um, what I'll just start explaining that what we're going to do is a way to get in touch with our parts called a quick draw exercise. It's something that you can use yourself anytime you feel those parts blending from a dream, wanting your attention from inner conversation, but you can't quite get clear about it. You're having a felt sense, um, and you want to be able to uh, let that part have more space to let you know what it wants, what it's trying to communicate. Or it's also for those of you who work with clients or who are sharing this model peer to peer with friends, or someone, even family members. We This is a good exercise, a place to begin a conversation. It's an externalization, a moving out of what's inside of us, just like speaking for our parts helps us to have more centeredness, have more self energy. This also usually does. Okay, so just take your paper longwise and for this quick draw exercise, just fold it. It doesn't have to be neat. The corners don't have to match. We're going to divide it into 6 sections. So, fold that section into thirds. And if you want it, just keep it simple and make 4 sections. You can do that. There's a variety of ways to do this. The main thing is that you end up with some sections in your paper where you can draw a part in each section. So, drawing a part. That can be anything that gets that down onto the paper, like a symbol, a sketch, a scribble will work, a color, a shape. Try to stay away from words. If you need to use words, maybe put them in a thought balloon or a chat balloon. I've got a couple examples here of recent ones, where you can see that it just sketches. Just maybe it's hard to see. Can you see that? Here's one with maybe a little bit darker use of ink, just different. There's a symbol in there. Emoticons work, different kinds of faces. And in this exercise, you don't need to fill every one of the sections because it's quick. We're not going, that's one of the beauties of it. You just get an impression out. It's quick. So any questions? Some of the questions that often come up are, well, I can't draw. What if I can't draw? Well, if you can just make a mark or scribble, that works. We're going to take just another few minutes here to do a little parts detecting and see who is in there of our inner relatives, and just get started with the first one. Some of you already are, I can see. That's great. And then after maybe 30 seconds, be moving to your second segment of your paper and drawing another part. Maybe a part that has something to say about the way you drew the first part. So I'm going to be quiet. I wonder if we could have maybe 3 more minutes of flute music, Steve, while we're drawing our parts for a quick draw. Thank you. So, uh, we're inviting you into breakout rooms. How about 2 people per room, Steve? So that we each have 4 or 5 minutes to say what the quick draw exercise was like and to speak for any parts or describe any parts that want to be talked about or spoken for.
Let's see. I'm
Okay.
going to create. I'm going to create about 15 breakout rooms. We may have more than 2 in that room, but I'm just going to randomly assign these and we'll try that. So
Okay.
we'll have. Is that okay to have 4 or 5 in each room, Susan?
Uh,
Or do you want more?
Actually, I was thinking of only 2 people per
Yeah.
room, so
Let
that
me try that.
everybody has like 4 or 5 minutes to talk.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Okay.
And I'm putting in the chat, what was the quick draw exercise like for you? And each person will have 4 or 5 minutes to say what it was like, or describe a part that came up, or anything that was surprising, or
Okay. We have got breakout rooms galore coming up here, ladies and gentlemen. So there might be a couple rooms with 2 people, Susan, just because we were odd number, but let's
that's
let's
fine.
go ahead and give this a shot.
Thank you.
Welcome back. As you're coming back, if you were stranded in your group room alone, I apologize. I felt like a breakout room matchmaker there, trying to get everybody connected with someone. It was maybe, I think next time what we'll do is we might try and have 3 or 4 to a room, so that way if somebody isn't able to get in or doesn't join, there's a better chance to connect with somebody. So if you felt lonely in your breakout room by yourself, I apologize. We were with you in spirit. I was trying to get somebody in to see you. So
I didn't take it personal.
oh, good, thank you.
Eventually,
I was
we connected.
Susan, I was telling folks I was trying to be the breakout room matchmaker and get folks connected behind the scenes, but it wasn't working. We'll try and maybe put 3 or 4 in a group room or a breakout room next time, just in case somebody doesn't show, then you've got a better chance at connecting. So, but thanks for being patient with us. Oh, Susan, you're muted still.
Thank you. Yes, we have that communicated now, that might work better.
Yes, yeah, I've never done that many group rooms, so that was an
Okay.
experience.
All right. Well,
Wow.
my intention was for people to have long enough to speak, in groups, just in pairs. So I'm hoping that if you have things that you want to say, that you can find someone later today, and take your quick draw and talk about it. We are going to move on to what we call a chatterfall, so that we can see what this was like for people, what you might want to have us bring up next time. I know that one thing I would like to see next time is more time for questions, more time for conversation.
Yeah.
So, Steve, are you ready to do the chatterfall?
I think so. And Andrew, I'll have you go ahead and post the questionnaire link too for folks if they want to try and do that as we get
Okay,
ready
so
to wrap.
all right,
wrap things up.
thank you, Andrew. Here's how a chatterfall works. It means that we put our responses into the chat all at the same time, and we'll invite you to do 3 rounds of chatterfall. So in the first one, you'll write a little bit, but wait until I give you the go ahead to press send or enter to put it into the chat, and that way it will all fall into the chat and flow together. And Andrew's going to read a little bit of how people respond to the chatterfall inquiries. So the first inquiry is that going to go in the chat or up on the screen? The first one is, Steve, do you have that one to go on the screen, or is it in the chat? I can't see the chat. Oh, here we go. What was this like for you today? And just, take 30, 40 seconds to write, what was this like for you today? And I'll be quiet here for half a minute while you do that. All right. Press return and put it in the chatterfall. Thank you.
Yes, a lot of responses already.
Wow.
That's great. We've got informative, insightful, informative, introspection, frustrating, balancing, discovery,
Hmm.
All right, let's move on to our second inquiry for the Chatterfall, and we'll take about 45 seconds to write it, and then I'll let you know when to get it into the chat. This one is, do you have any concerns about today? Just write down any concern if you have any today. If you don't have any, just write no concerns. But that's the inquiry. Any concerns? Okay. I see people are getting this into the chat because we don't have enough time to wait for me to say go. But let's get everyone's response in here now so we can see what the concerns are. And the next inquiry and the final one then is, what would you like to see in our next webinar on IFS and Indigenous healing ways? What would you like to see or have presented or do interaction exercise wise in our webinar number 2 in a month? About 30 seconds, and then I'll say go, and we can all get this. This is quite a chatterfall coming quickly. All right, go. If you haven't already, put your response about what you would like to see more of.
Now they're really coming in.
Yeah, thank you so much. I see the one on more on 8Cs. We were going to return to that. We can return to it next time. We will. The 8Cs are an important part of IFS. The 8Cs of self, the IFS Cs of self. You can Google that as well. More time for interaction in break rooms. I want to see that too. I think that this is the first time this team has presented together. We will be able to build more of that in as we have more practice together. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone, for showing up today, for staying for 2 hours, for your interest, for your concern.
We will broadcast session 2. I put it in there just as a prompt. If you registered for the first one, I believe we set it up so that you're automatically registered for each subsequent session. So you can double check, but you should be able to load that onto your calendar, and you should be registered for all 5 sessions. So hopefully that'll reduce some of the registration hoops that you have to jump through each time. Closing thoughts from Susan or Bim?
Go ahead, Bim.
Just thank you, and thanks for being here. And I'm excited about the model, and I believe that it is a way that we can treat the trauma that's plaguing our nations. And there's no one right way or whatever, but it is one of the ways. Just like the medicine wheel, it's like, but I think with this model, along with our ceremonies, and it goes a long way in getting to the root. And to me, the root is trauma. But thank you all for being here, and appreciate each and every one of you, and be a good relative. Return to your center.
somebody had mentioned that it says the last Friday of each month. It should be the last Wednesday. I'll have to go back to our comms team and see if that maybe is a typo, but it's the last Wednesday of each month through July. So and thank you
Yes,
so
and
much.
just quickly, a thank you because we are overtime and blessings on your way. Hope to see you again soon.